On the show today, the Matildas pay dispute drags on.
Can anyone beat the All Blacks this Rugby World Cup?
And we take a look at Australia's squad to tour Bangladesh.
Stick around for all that and more. This is the Armchair Experts. Hello and welcome to the Armchair Experts, and thank you so much for joining us. My name's Daniel Jeffrey, alongside me is Jordan Matthews, and together we'll be taking you through the week's biggest sporting news.
That's right, we'll be having a bit of a look at AFL and NRL finals for this weekend and ask whether Chelsea have already lost the EPL. But first, let's get some news headlines.
Sydney Swans forward Lance Franklin has been ruled out of the rest of the AFL finals as he undergoes treatment for a mental health issue. The news compounds the Swans' injury crisis, which sees the side go into this week's knockout semi-final without Kieran Jack, Luke Parker and Sam Reid. Reid was also ruled out for the season after suffering a hamstring injury in the Swans' loss to Fremantle last Saturday. Jared Hayne has made an unconvincing start to the NFL season in his debut for the San Francisco 49ers. Hayne fumbled his first punt return, but rebounded with a few good plays to finish with 20 all-purpose yards. Fellow running back Carlos Hyde pushed Hayne further down the San Francisco depth chart, picking up 150 yards and 2 touchdowns in the 49ers win. Novak Djokovic has beaten Roger Federer to win the US Open for the second time. Despite a hostile crowd, Djokovic prevailed in 4 sets to take home his 10th Grand Slam. In the women's draw, 26th seed Flavia Pennetta downed fellow Italian Roberta Vinci in straight sets in the final before announcing her retirement from the sport. And finally, Australia has routed England in the 5th one-day international to finish their Ashes tour on a high note. John Hastings and Mitchell Marsh took 7 wickets between them as England were bowled out for 138, a total Australia chased down with 8 wickets in hand.
Yeah, so a nice way to wrap up the Ashes tour of England with a win in the last ODI of the series. Bangladesh tour starts in 3 weeks. We've got 2 test matches there. The squad was announced on Monday. A few surprise inclusions, so what's your initial thoughts?
Well, obviously everyone's scratching their heads about one particular paceman, and we'll get to him later. For me, I'm most interested about the spinners that we pick. Now, Nathan Lyon is obviously first choice spinner and he's going to bowl a lot of overs. I'm interested to see who they pick as the second spinner. They've got Stephen O'Keefe in the squad, but I think Glenn Maxwell, I think the time is right for him to come into the squad. His bowling has improved markedly in the past few years. His batting, we all know how dangerous he is there. His technique's probably it's not a traditional test match technique, obviously, but I think he can do a job down the lower order. And his fielding's superb, so I reckon bring him into the squad. I reckon he'll have a similar impact to what Moeen Ali did these past Ashes. Score valuable runs down the lower order and then pick up some handy wickets every now and then as well.
Yeah, I agree with you that Maxwell's improved. Obviously his batting's improved, his bowling's improved as well. I just don't think that we've got a second genuine spinner that's good enough to be playing Test cricket right now. Now, realistically, in the subcontinent, they're going to play 2 spinners. Bangladesh will probably play 3, if not 4. So, Lyon's obviously our first choice. I don't think we've got another one good enough. Maxwell's probably the next best option, but I just don't see how much he's going to give us in the long-term future. Yes, he's young, he might improve further, but I just don't like the selection at all, because I think when we come back to the Australian summer, he's not going to score runs against good bowling like New Zealand, and he's not going to get blokes out in Test cricket. His bowling just doesn't have enough to get blokes out. He doesn't turn the ball a lot, and he hasn't got a lot of variation. So I think it's just a difficult one for me to get around, to be honest.
So another one that a few other people have had difficulty getting around is the selection of Andrew Feckerty. 30-year-old, never played a test match. What do you think of this selection?
Look, it's bamboozling to everyone who follows the cricket, I think. It's really came as a surprise. We've got a really good young crop of fast bowlers playing Shield cricket in Australia. A lot of in and out of injury, but at the moment they're all pretty fit. They've had a good rest, and none of them have been selected over Feckerty, a 30-year-old uncapped test player. It's ridiculous to me. I don't understand it.
Yeah, you're not alone on that one, I think. I think with Fekete, you've got to ask what the long-term plan is with this guy. I mean, because Mitchell Johnson and Josh Hazlewood are going to come straight back into the test side. They've just been rested for this series. So you've got to ask, Fekete's, he's not going to play a major role in the near future. So I just think surely this was a great opportunity to give some of our young pacemen an opportunity getting familiar with the test setup. Now, I think there are so many guys that you could have picked over Fekete who offer you a better long-term future. Talking Jason Behrendorff, James Pattinson in particular, Gurinder Sandhu and Sean Abbott, all these guys, surely I just would have picked any of them over Fekete, to be honest.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And look, now we look to a guy who's at the end of his test career. Another, I guess, surprise, not so much of a surprise, but I guess you got to go, how has he been picked again? And that's Shaun Marsh. He hasn't scored runs. He's getting to the back of his test career. He's injury prone. There is no long-term future at him at the top of the order. I just don't understand why they've picked him to go around for another 2 test series when they could have really pumped in a few young guys. But in saying that, nobody's really knocking on the door, are they?
Well, I'm not too sure about that, to be honest. I think that they're going to pick Shaun Marsh as an opener for this series. I'm almost certain of that. For me, you do have some guys knocking on the door. You've got Joe Burns, who showed when India came out here that he's got the technique for test cricket. He just needs a run in the side. He's already got 2 50s to his name. Cameron Bancroft as well is the obvious one for me. Had a great Shield season last year, and he bats long. He bats like an old test match batsman, faces a lot of deliveries, soaks up the pressure. He's just the type of guy, especially when Dave Warner comes back into the side, he's the type of guy we are crying out for up the top of the order. As I said, they're probably going to go with Marsh, maybe Bancroft or Burns, I'm not too sure, but I would have gone with Burns and Bancroft, to be perfectly honest.
All right, and a prediction for the 2-match tour.
I'm going 2-0 with the Aussies. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if Bangladesh do grab 1 win. They're a much better side than what we're used to seeing come out from that country. But I just think the young blokes for Australia are really going to step up, I think, and show that this side's got a really promising young future under Steve Smith.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Bangladesh are a lot better side than people give them credit for. They've improved over the 3 formats quite a bit in the last decade or so. I'm going to go 1-1 just because it's in their home country. I think the ball's going to turn square. It's not a great strength of ours playing against spin in the subcontinent, and it's not a great strength of ours as having good spinners. So I think we might struggle a little bit in that regard. I'm going to go 1-1 just to mix it up a bit.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, of course, one of the biggest sporting stories this week has been Jared Haynes' debut for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, he made a bit of a shaky start to his debut yesterday, but it still had plenty of people interested. And that got us wondering, how many people are going to start following the NFL now that Jared Haynes' over there?
I think Jared Hayne playing for the 49ers and all the coverage he's been getting is really good for the sport in Australia.
No, because I've watched a couple games and it just hasn't interested me in the past, so don't see why they'll change anything.
Yeah, I started watching more of the 49ers games, and I went and bought the new Madden game too, just to see his little face in the game and pass the ball and get a touchdown. It's great.
I didn't really watch the NFL before, so I probably won't now. But he's pretty hot.
No, I didn't have much of an interest in the NFL beforehand, but since Jared Haynes in there, he's definitely captivated my interest.
Probably not, because I wasn't really interested in football to begin with, but I can see why it would make some people more interested.
Well, I'm actually quite interested as it is, but I'll be watching.
I never really liked Jared Hayne when he was in the NRL, so I don't see how I'd start now.
Nah, 49ers are my life now. They're my bae. They're the ones I want. The team that I support, and I'm gonna buy a jersey and rock it around Minto, where he's a lot from. So it's great. It's a great time.
I think he's a great guy. Good look for the game. Good for Australia. I'm wrapped on him.
So a few differing opinions there on whether people are going to be following Jared Hayne too closely over in the NFL. Personally, I reckon San Francisco might not have got every Australian as a new fan, but tell you what, they've got a fair few of us.
Yeah, look, it's brilliant, really. It's good to see most of the Aussies getting around Jared Hayne, which is fantastic. So, good fun.
Yeah, let's just hope he stops dropping his punts.
That'd be a start.
Now it's that time where we look back at the past 7 days to tell you guys what we learnt this week. And Jordan, what did you learn this week?
Look, it's something that really came to fruition on the weekend. That was in Aussie Rules finals. Big forwards win your games. Kicking big scores will win you finals footy. And we saw it on the weekend with, West Coast, Coleman medalist Josh Kennedy led the way. Drew Petrie and Jared Waite did it for the Kangas. And Eddie Betts and Tex Walker did it for the Crows. So I guess we really saw it happen. Big forwards, and not necessarily key forwards, but goal kickers win your finals footy. And obviously the Swans were let down by their goal kicking, so it does make a massive difference. If you're potent up front, you go a long way to winning the game.
So yeah, obviously key goal kickers, very important in September. But for me, what I learned this week is that Brendan Rodgers is just not tactically up to it for the EPL. He won a lot of plaudits a few years ago when he got Liverpool playing really good football as they came second in the EPL. But even then, a few cracks started to appear. I think that game, the infamous game where Steven Gerrard slipped over when Chelsea came to Anfield, everyone knew that Chelsea were going to sit back and just hit Liverpool on the counter-attack. And Brendan Rodgers just didn't plan for it. Now, you look at this season, he's insisting on playing a 4-3-3 formation, even though he doesn't have any wingers. It's leaving Christian Benteke isolated up front, and it means that he's having to play central players out on the wings where they're not very comfortable. I think what he needs to do, go back to a 4-4-2 diamond. It'll allow him to play Coutinho, Roberto Firmino and James Milner all in positions they're more comfortable in, and it'll give Christian Benteke more support up front in the form of guys like Divock Origi and Danny Ings until Daniel Sturridge comes back. I think Rodgers has got to up his game, otherwise he might find himself doing a bit of a Tony Abbott and find himself out of a job. Now, of course, one thing everyone's learning a bit more about this week is that our female footballers are not being paid very much. Now, last week, the Matildas cancelled their tour to the USA as their pay dispute drags on. And so Jordan decided to take this issue to the whiteboard to break it down.
The sports industry in Australia is worth more than $12 billion. So with that in mind, you wouldn't expect an elite athlete to be earning below the minimum wage, right? Wrong. The Matildas, who earn $21,000 a year, cancelled their tour of the United States this week amid an ongoing pay dispute with Football Federation Australia. The Professional Footballers Association, or PFA, have been locked in a collective bargaining agreement with the FFA since 2013, aiming to increase wages of all professional footballers in Australia. However, the deal took a nasty turn last week when the PFA laid out a fresh set of demands that included an increase in the A-League salary cap, an immediate pay rise for the Socceroos, and a 10% increase for the Matildas. That's right, 10%. That's a smidge more than $2,000 for the Matildas, who still earn well below the minimum wage. But here's where it gets worse. The FFA's counter-proposal included bringing forward 2 months of unpaid wages for the Matildas, as well as the prize money from their World Cup campaign in June. The PFA flat out rejected the offer. But through this debacle, the Australian male footballers continue to collect their wages, while the Matildas have been forced into an unpaid protest for contracts that have low wages and no maternity leave. There's an argument that the Matildas shouldn't receive as much money due to the lack of revenue that they generate. But if this is the case, why are we so comfortable with the PFA negotiating a rise in the A-League salary cap, a competition whose clubs collectively lost $18 million last season? But here's the bottom line. The Matildas are a world-class team. They're ranked in the top 10 by FIFA and have been more successful than the Socceroos at World Cups. But the PFA seem mainly interested in using them as a bargaining chip to get higher wages for A-League and Socceroos players. It's time this attitude changed. The Matildas might not fill the FFA's bank statements like the Socceroos do, but they are undoubtedly elite world-class athletes. It's time we started treating them as such.
So yeah, obviously a very complex and critical issue, this one, but for me the takeaway is simple. I mean, you wouldn't ask a checkout chick to work for less than minimum wage with no paid maternity leave. Yet for some reason this is being demanded of our professional female athletes. I think it's pathetic, to be honest.
Yeah, look, it's very interesting, and I guess the big thing is that this collective bargaining agreement's worth $120 million. Majority of it's going towards the male professional players, and the PFA is pretty much holding a gun to the Matildas' heads, and they're getting the raw end of the deal out of this whole thing, so it's really disappointing.
Yeah, it's just not good enough, really. Now it's that time where we preview the next week of sport with 5 fast questions. Jordan, we'll start with the NRL. Sharks or Cowboys, and Roosters or the Bulldogs?
Look, I think the Doggies probably didn't show enough last week for me to warrant picking them this week. I think the Roosters will be too strong. I don't think they'll lose 2 weeks in a row, so I'm going to go with the Roosters. And up north, I think Cowboys will be too strong for the Sharkies. I think the Sharkies played well last week, but I think the Cowboys will be too strong and they'll knock them off.
I'm going to tip an upset up in North Queensland. I'm going to go with the Sharks. They're playing good footy, although North Queensland going to be very hard to beat up there, especially with Jonathan Thurston. In the other game, I'm sticking with you on this one, though. Bulldogs didn't show enough last week to warrant them beating the Roosters. Okay, so AFL now. We've got Hawks, Crows, or in Sydney, Swans versus Kangas. I'll take the Sydney Swans against North Melbourne. I think their midfield's just going to be too good for Norths, even though they're missing a lot of firepower up front. And in the other game, Hawthorn just don't deserve to win another game after wearing that horrendous jersey last week, so I'm going to tip the Crows. Primarily, though, because their forward line is playing very well at the moment.
Look, Adelaide they're red hot at the moment, but I think Hawthorn have proved all year that they are, when they're at their best, they are the best team in the competition. I don't think they'll play like they did again last week. I think they'll probably be a bit too strong for Adelaide, so I'm going to pick them there. And I'm going to go with the Kangas against Sydney. I think Brad Scott's got them really well tuned at the moment. He coached really well last week. Tactically, he did a lot of things to impress a lot of people. And I think they might cause an upset over a depleted Sydney side.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, Rugby World Cup starts this week, of course, and big question, can anyone stop the All Blacks?
Look, they've been the dominant team in international rugby for almost a decade, so they're reigning world champions for a reason, and they're going into this tournament as red-hot favourites. If they play well and keep their squad fit, I don't think so. Short answer, no. I don't think anyone can.
Yeah, it's a tough ask, isn't it? I mean, there are a few teams that can trouble them. I think England at home, especially if they slow the game down, get their forwards right on top. Australia showed that they are capable of beating New Zealand earlier this year, but it's going to be a mighty big ask to do it once in the same calendar year.
Yeah,
New Zealand, clear favourites.
Yeah, no, definitely. And speaking of England, they're in Australia's group. So who do you see going through? Who are the top two in their group?
It's England and Australia for me. I think Wales were the surprise pack at the last World Cup, and they played great rugby, but I just think they've been hit too hard by injuries. I mean, Lee Halfpenny in particular, that's a big out for them. He's a real kind of barometer for the side, and his goal kicking is such a crucial aspect. I think they'll miss him too much.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear cut if both those teams play well, they should go through. So the last question is, of course, we'll stay in England and we'll go to the EPL. Has Chelsea already lost the premiership?
You would say so, wouldn't you? I mean, they're 11 points behind Manchester City already, and they're just not playing well. I mean, I'm not sure whether it's an issue with personnel or Jose Mourinho's coaching, but they're not doing enough, and they're a long way behind already. That being said, the EPL just throws up surprise after surprise each year, so if there's any squad in any league that can come back from that, it is Chelsea, but it's a tough ask.
Yeah, definitely. And look, as you said, it's a long season. Although City at the moment, they just look red hot. They look that much better than anyone else, and they haven't conceded a goal yet. So, look, I think they've gone a long way to really proving how good they actually are, but you can't write off Chelsea. All right, guys, that's about all we've got time for this week. But before we go, we're just going to leave you with one quick suggestion and for something you should check out. So, Dan, what do you got for us this week?
Yeah, I'm suggesting you check out the career retrospective that the NBA put up on their YouTube channel for Moses Malone. Now, Malone tragically passed away earlier this week, aged 60, and he remains one of the NBA's really underappreciated superstars. He's a 3-time MVP, he's an NBA champion, and he's the all-time leading rebounder in offensive rebounds. Now, so check out this video. We'll chuck the link in the description for you.
Yeah, look, he's one of the NBA's forgotten superstars, in my opinion. He had a career that spanned 20-plus years as a professional athlete, and he was an absolute monster on the boards, incredibly athletic. Definitely something you should check out, and it's worth looking at. All right, guys, and that's all we've got time for this week. So make sure you check us out on Facebook and Twitter, and also subscribe to UOWTV to keep up with all the latest episodes.
Yeah, that's right. We'll be back next Thursday to break down all the biggest sporting headlines. Until then, grab yourselves a good armchair to watch all this week's sporting action, and we'll see you then. Take care.